Well, hello again, friends. Welcome to Investment Immigration Conversations. I'm your host, Carolyn Lee, principal and founder of Carolyn Lee PLLC, a U.S. investment immigration law firm dedicated to helping clients build their futures with investment immigration. And those clients include US-based regional centers, developers, and fund managers. And so this is a part of a series of webinars dedicated to you folks, regional centers under the RIA. And boy, big reveal, our surprise mystery guest, the one, the only, incomparable Suzanne Lazicki. Yay, the crowd goes wild.
I'm honored to be here, Carolyn.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. And who better to have than Suzanne? Because today it's going to be all about the I-956F business plans. And of course, Suzanne is business plan writer and blogger extraordinaire. So, and we only have really half hour today, so let's just kick it. This presentation is informational only. No part of this presentation is legal advice. No attorney-client relationship is created without a signed engagement agreement between Carolyn Lee PLLC and client. The content may be promotional and should be considered attorney advertising. Any timeframes are estimates and vary widely, and our content is copyrighted. Our roadmap, a little bit about our firm, about Suzanne, the role of the regional center, the I-956F. This is what we're talking about. This is our second webinar talking about the I-956F project filings under the RIA. And specifically, we're talking about the I-956F business plan today. So we're going to have a couple of slides on the purpose and the elements, in particular, the matter of hoe standard. And we're going to kind of close off with exhibits, the meat of the business plan, or I should say really the supporting players, the important supporting players in the business plan. In the interest of time, come to our website, come learn all about me and our awesome investment immigration practice. That's all we do, investment immigration. But I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about our incredible organization. So we have 8 dedicated team members exclusively handling investment immigration. And those team members include 7 with advanced degrees, including JDs, master's degrees, and PhD. And excellence is our standard. It is our everything. Technology is a huge part of what we do. We could even call C-Flow our proprietary case management system, our 9th team member. And by the way, we're recruiting and growing. So we really value technology's role in helping us be excellent in everything we do in investment immigration. So Suzanne, Suzanne is way too modest to tout what she does, but she really has become such an important voice and pen in our space. Her data, her analysis, her writing, her reporting, her editorial views, her observations about all things EB-5 have been educational and eye-opening, and hold us all accountable in this space for what we do, I feel. So I'm just, so honored to call Suzanne friend. She is a business plan writer and consultant in EB-5 and E2s in investment immigration, so we're in the same space. She's the founder of Lucid Professional Writing. She specializes in investor visa programs and has written lots and lots and lots of business plans. So if you have a business plan need, please contact Suzanne. And she serves on the Public Policy Committee of IIUSA, which I co-chair. And she's also an advisor in the investor advocacy organization, American Immigrant Investor Alliance, or AIIA. So Suzanne, welcome again.
Thank you.
Okay, so the regional center role, let's just start with this because we're talking about sphere of topics in general, and specifically the business plan today, where the feature player is the regional center. The regional center is the primarily regulated entity under the Regional Center program and under the EB-5 Reform and Integrity Act of 2022, or the RIA, or RIA, as I affectionately call her. The regional center is the required affiliated entity with each and every project under the regional center program. And the regional center has very direct and serious obligations to comply with the RIA, the oversight and administration regime that the RIA created. And those obligations include eventually filing the I-956 to seek redesignation as a regional center under the RIA, filing the annual certification on the Form I-956G, where it reports on itself and each of its projects on an annual basis. And last but not least, annually filing and paying the integrity fee. And it is also responsible for record keeping and to be prepared for audits, which are coming our way as recently announced. And here on the right is a playlist of various webinars that we've presented about the regional center program and due diligence for regional centers under the RIA. We've created a regional center YouTube playlist that you can check out, and this webcast will certainly be a part of that. All right, so the 956F, as we talked about last time, the I-956F is a mandatory filing for all projects seeking to raise EB-5 capital under the RIA. And it has 6 statutory required elements, including a comprehensive business plan, economic analysis, investment offering documents with the required disclosures, policies and procedures to ensure compliance with securities laws and the RIA, and a certification of compliance that must be signed by both the regional center and the issuer of securities. It's filed by regional centers, but there's also an issuer certification. The NCE must also certify with the I-956F form that's filed. And the I-956F is it's a necessary component to fundraising in EB-5 for your EB-5 investors, who must include proof that their investment and their filing the Form I-526E is duly associated with a filed I-956F. More on all of that in our last webcast. Let's focus on the comprehensive business plan. That's what we're going to talk about today. So the business plan, this is really the heart of the I-956F filing. This is where the action is in terms of describing the capital investment project. It's got to show how the NCE will create the required jobs. Now, that's bringing us back to the technical function of a business plan in the EB-5 sphere. If you look at the regulations that require the business plan, you'll see that it's right under a subsection that talks about I-9s and verifying direct jobs. So in the non-regional center context, the jobs that are required will have to be verified and shown with I-9s, W-2s, payroll records. So the comprehensive business plan is about showing job creation that will take place as a result of the EB-5 investors' investment into the new commercial enterprise. We're not going to show direct job creation in almost all instances where regional center projects are involved. It's going to be about indirect job creation. So rather than the W-2s and I-9s, it's going to be about the comprehensive business plan. That will do all the work in showing the plan for job creation. The regulation says, I always like to go back to the language of the authority. The regulation says what's required to show job creation is a copy of a comprehensive business plan showing that Due to the nature and projected size of the new commercial enterprise, the need for not fewer than 10 qualifying employees will result, including approximate dates within the next 2 years and when such employees will be hired. So this is sort of the core launch point of what we're talking about today. We're coming back to the regulation that tells us what's needed. It's a comprehensive business plan and what it's got to have. Now,
in the regional center context, people are looking at that due to the nature and projected size, the need for employees will result.
yes, exactly. Exactly. Now, how do we show, how do we do this? How do we present this comprehensive business plan? That is where matter of ho comes in, because matter of ho is not the regulation, but the precedent decision that gives us the standards for what constitutes a comprehensive business plan. And matter of ho is one of 4 precedent decisions issued in 1998 by the Administrative Appeals Office, which is the administrative appellate body over the USCIS, or Legacy INS, as the agency was called then. So the standard for what for comprehensiveness in the business plan is governed by matter of ho. And again, let's look at the language in the matter of ho decision. It says the plan should include a description of the business's objectives, a market analysis, including names of competing businesses and their relative strengths and weaknesses, a comparison of the competition's products and pricing structures, a description of the target market and prospective customers, a description of any manufacturing or production processes, materials required and supply sources, details of any contracts executed, marketing strategy, including pricing, advertising, and servicing, organizational structures, and sales cost and income projections, and details of the bases therefore. In addition, specifically with respect to employment, the business plan must set forth the company's personnel experience, staffing requirements, job descriptions for all positions, and a timetable for hiring within the next 2 years. Suzanne, before I go on, what's your, I mean, you must have, like lived with, you might even have a copy of Matter of Ho tucked under your pillow. I don't know. But when you look at these, when you think about, when you look at this language, what's sort of swimming through your mind as a business?
Carolyn, I've lived with this so much, I have it memorized. And so I'd like to point out that you've left out my 2 favorite sentences from Matter of Ho.
Oh my gosh.
The sentence that comes just before this section and the sentence that comes
Yes,
just after it.
Okay.
Just before this section, they say, mere conclusory assertions do not allow the service to determine whether the job creation is more reliable than hopeful speculation. And that more reliable than hopeful speculation, I think that is really the standard that they're setting. What they want to see is a case that what we're presenting here is not just a pipe dream. It's not just speculation. There's enough analysis that it convinces them this is a real thing. This is really going to happen. The projections are reliable. So these details of what you can put in that is on this slide are different types of details that's helpful to accomplish that purpose, that it's, quote, more than hopeful speculation. And then what comes after the section that you quoted is, most importantly, the business plan must be credible. And again, that I think the challenge is really just to establish credibility, which is done by providing this kind of detail.
Sister, you have preached it, and I'm going to prove to you that our friendship was meant to be. And look at this.
Yes.
So I mean, what Suzanne just hit on is the essence. It's the soul of Matter of Ho. It's got to be credible, and you will see this in 956F RFEs. The sufficiency of the business plan is a favorite topic of 956F RFEs, and it's always going to get to this. Is the business plan concrete? Is it beyond mere speculation? Like Suzanne just said, is the business plan feasible? I mean, you really have to, there are business plans in other contexts and other capital raises where you're pitching to prospective lenders and, you know, other investors and stuff like that. Our business plan in our world is very specific. It's got to be one where you have to almost picture, this is the way that I approach it. You know, you have to picture an examiner who's just, you know, looking, who's just got this. They don't know anything about you. They don't know anything about what you're planning to do. And they really got to be able to picture this in a very concrete way. Most importantly, the business plan must be credible, and it won't be credible unless it's palpable, unless it's really concrete, beyond a mere pipe dream, far, far, far beyond a mere pipe dream. So meaning, what this means, the business plan cannot be merely speculative. These are my words. Concrete undertakings and commitments must be in place and demonstrated. We're going to talk about the exhibits that demonstrate these concrete commitments. I also think that a business plan is really about a balance. It is not distillable to a checklist, because a business is a living enterprise and you're capturing a moment in the life of that enterprise. And so what you're balancing is what has already taken place and what it is projected to be. So you have those two elements, and each business plan is going to present those 2 points in time in a different way.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start talking about how we demonstrate that this is, you know, really cooking. This is from our checklist that we give to our clients. And this is based on real estate development business plan, which is, you know, not in all business plans, but it's going to be in most business plans. So market study, the market analysis is very important. Wherever there's a matter of hoe or comprehensive business plan, RFE, you're going to most likely see some component of tell us more about why this is feasible, and that you've really, really done your diligence in terms of the space you're coming into as an industry. TEA evidence, of course, is usually an exhibit, you know, although it's a separate requirement for your I-956F if you are cited in a TEA or if it's an infrastructure project. Regional center, you know, approval notice type stuff to show due affiliation. And, you know, there are also often in our filings, we're going to have a separate section that's got all of the regional center affiliated affiliation documents, like the affiliation agreement and the regional center approvals and amendments and so forth. We have a section that reserves additional exhibits depending on the nature of the project. Again, this is a real estate development sample, so we're going to have a construction schedule. Remember that even in the regulation, there is a discussion of timetable. It is important to concretely lay out what we think the lifespan of this project is going to be. And there's a lot to say about this, because if not well crafted, this can really be it can turn out to be a difficulty, because again, these are living undertakings. Sometimes there are delays. There often are. Sometimes things can happen actually earlier as well, which can also cause other challenges with job creation modeling. So there's got to be a construction schedule in there, though, presented, and it's got to be based on your best understanding of how the construction is going to go. Construction budget, this is very important, because your construction CapEx feed your economic analysis as inputs. third-party budget verification of those construction expenditures, as verification of those inputs, because those inputs must be reasonable. They must be verifiable. So getting a third-party verification of those inputs is really important. Sometimes the input is not CapEx, but it's actually revenues or projected revenues, in which case you want your financials or pro formas in there. Ideally, third-party verified. Contracts, so you will recall that there's contracts executed as an element of matter of hoe. So in a real estate development deal, those executed build contracts with your GC, GM, architects are going to be very, very important. They're going to do a lot of the work in establishing the concrete nature of where you are with this undertaking. Pro formas, financial statements, a must in every business plan. You've got to have projections, financial projections of how this business is going to fare from pre-stabilization to post-stabilization. Permits are important, and I have a lot of conversations with clients about this. Sometimes sometimes you'll want to go into this perhaps a little too early, or when it's not quite ripe for demonstrating this concrete undertaking. Gotta ideally have entitlements in place, and maybe a demo permit, and ideally a building permit as well, to show that this is shovel ready. You're ready to start spending and building and creating jobs. Appraisal, usually in these, there's the underlying land and the project that is being built or that will be built. And so there is an appraisal that's associated with the project that we'd like to include. Evidence of financing, this is really important, and I'd love to hear Suzanne's view on this as well. So typically in the capital stack for an EB-5 project presented in the 956F, EB-5 is not going to be the exclusive participant. There will be the equity slice in there contributed by the developer, and often there will be other lenders, senior lenders in the deal. And so we want evidence of those other slices being in place and committed to the project and included with the 956F. Evidence of bridge financing. This is a whole topic in and of itself. Sometimes there's earlier expenditure that's coming into the project that is being spent, for which job creation credit will want to be drawn by later investors coming in and funding the deal. So where that's the case, we want evidence of bridge financing that says this earlier money, whether it's equity or debt, is coming in anticipation of being replaced or repaid by the later arriving EB-5 capital. So that nexus has to be presented and in the record and in the business plan. It is critical that it be presented in the business plan. As I mentioned, evidence of construction or senior loan commitment, if that's a part of the stack. Property deeds and leases. This is another conversation that I sometimes have, often as an indication that maybe maybe we need a little more time here. We want that property secured. It's got to be in hand, because I have seen instances where the property is not in hand, and there comes an RFE, and it turns out that property never closed. Can be lots of problems associated with that scenario. And I've been called in to assist in those situations. Investor timeline. This is important because as a matter of policy, we have a USCIS pronouncement of policy about when the jobs must be in place, and that is 2.5 years from the time that an I-526E petition is approved by USCIS. So this is a hard one to explain because it's elastic, it's investor by investor, and it's not within anybody's control other than USCIS. So it's your 526, your investor's 526E petition approval from the time it's filed, to the time it's approved, and then 2.5 years from that time is the amount of time that one has to establish job creation. So got to do your best to map out that projected time frame with the timeline for the life of the project where the job creation is anticipated to occur. Construction or construction and operations mapped against your approximate time frame for when you think the investor's job creation windows will close. And I'm going to pause. I'm probably like right at the half-hour mark. Suzanne, what's your approach to this, to these exhibits and, you know, demonstrating the concreteness of?
Well, a few comments. Some people might be wondering, why did you just skip over the business plan? And all of a sudden here we are at the business plan exhibits. Does this mean the business plan is not important? And honestly, she did that because this is what the application will stand or fall on, is the exhibits. Because USCIS really wants the third-party detail, the independent evidence, the verifiable detail, as they call it. So the exhibits are critical to the business plan. The business plan will get denied or approved largely based on the exhibits. I think of the business plan sometimes as the cover story. It's a storytelling document that kind of pulls everything together and gives context so that when people come to all these detailed exhibits, they understand what they're looking at. So going to the exhibits is very important. And then as far as what are these exhibits doing, people might think, well, this is the purpose of the business plan is job creation. Where do I see these exhibits talking about jobs? And so this requires thinking back in the regional center context. What are we talking about when we're talking about job creation? In the regional center context, what's happening is that job creation is being calculated based on economic impact analysis. And the economist is taking inputs and throwing them into the economic model to come up with the jobs number. And so in the regional center context, what the business plan and the exhibits have to do is validate that these inputs to the economic model are valid. And there are two inputs that usually go in. It's in a building project, it would be construction expenditures and then revenue from the project. And so what this business plan exhibits list is, it gives information to back up the construction expenditures number that they're putting into the economic model. It's giving information to back up the revenue projections that are going in the economic model. And then it's giving a lot of exhibits that are relevant to timing of when this job creation is going to happen, of showing your licenses and permits, and the fact that you have all of these milestones in place to actually move forward is helping to validate the timing piece.
Exactly.
One question I wanted to ask you, Carolyn, is that one big judgment call kind of for people is this list right here is what ideally the evidence that you need to have in order for the I-956F to be approved. But can you file the I-956F with less than the maximum amount of evidence? If you don't have X, Y, or Z permit yet, you don't have the financing commitment yet. And I know your advice has probably changes on this over time, depending on context, depending on how quickly processing times are going. So how are you approaching that now as far as how close people need to get to your full checklist in order to actually file this?
Suzanne, once again, Vulcan mind meld, because that is exactly what I was thinking. That's exactly right. You know, this is our ideal list. We want to check. We want to put a little check mark next to every single element here. But very often we don't have every single element checked here. I mean, let's talk about the other pieces, the other elements of the capital stack, especially in a market like this with, you know, very high interest rates. Developers are waiting for the interest rates to calm down. And so we may not have I mean, a signed loan agreement. We may not have a commitment letter in place right now. What do we do? Does that mean that I-956F is not fileable? No, I will not say that. It is that balance. It's the totality of the picture. It's what do we have that shows that this is going to happen. There's very, very little doubt that this will not proceed as we're stating here. And the risks of what we say will happen, that's going to be a part of this. We're not going to be in most instances presenting a fait accompli in terms of a completed, although sometimes, depending on the size of a project, investors may be coming in after completion, but it's so in those instances, to answer your question, Suzanne, I really look at this as like it's this machine, and it's got these, there's, when you have strength in these other elements, when we if we have a solid set of evidence about the inputs, we've got those AIA contracts, they're in place, we have third-party verified budgets, we've got bids, we know that the budget is solid, we have these huge important contracts in place, we've got all the permits. Great. But we don't have all of the commitments in place, but the client is out there, and it's we know it's marketable. We have confidence letters. That makes, again, it's about credibility. It's about the presentation of the feasibility of this. And we have to also hold to that standard, because sometimes we will see RFEs, right, that is asking for evidence, more evidence, and standard on the evidence presented that is well beyond the applicable standard for the burden of proof, which is preponderance of the evidence, which means everything's got to show that it's more likely to be true than not. So, it's a balance. It's a balance in terms of the relationship and the advising and the evidence. Does that answer?
I think another part of the challenge of the balance is, on the one hand, the matter of hoe standard says the more detail you give, the more likely it is to be considered matter of hoe compliant. The other factor is that now with this I-956F, if there is something that's a material change from the documents you filed, you may have to file an amendment, which could be very expensive. So how do you balance that?
Yes.
Not putting so much detail that you're going to definitely have to amend something versus
1000%. And I kid you not, Suzanne, that was the very next thought that I wanted to touch on, is this. It's that balance is critical as well. On the one hand, yes, details, everything tamped down, nothing moving, everything solid, but that is not necessarily in the service of the undertaking of the project, because these things have quite a long lifespan. And again, they're living. And so we don't want to memorialize and put into the fixed record something that may not materialize, that may change. Because when you have that, then there is the specter of a potential material change finding that can unwind everything. Now, contrast that with changes that happen in the natural course as the business plan is executed. Those are expressly okay, thankfully, as is perfectly logical, but changes that happen outside the scope of what we said was going to happen could be material change. So there really is an art to it. I have to come back to, yes, we have these, checklists, we have the standard, we have the regulations, we have the policy guidance that we're extremely mindful of, but it's a balance, and it's an art to present the level of concrete detail that we need, and at the same time preserving the flexibility where we need to.
Right, and I would say as a project person, make sure you tell your business plan writer and your lawyer which aspects of the plan in your view are most subject to change. And we can tell you, if either we can write that into the document, or we can tell you, oh, on that specific detail in the EB-5 context, you're not allowed to change. Like changing a location, for example, can be in the normal course of business, and yet in EB-5, if you're relying on targeted employment area, you're not free to change your location. Whereas other things, we can bake flexibility into the document, so you may have leeway.
Yes, this is really, really important. Balance, I think, is the concept that just keeps coming up again and again for me. We're advising a lot of 829s right now, with complex RFEs and NOIDs, where we're asked to come in and assist. Is this petition salvageable? And so, you can almost see, when you're kicking off the fundraising, you're in sales mode. And there is it's very natural. We're going to want to hope for the best and see the best, and, and that's sort of the energy. It's got to be. But we've also got to kind of think about and project in time about that 829 and getting those investors through the 829. And if there are changes to the business plan, to the project, that will be tested probably well beyond the time one might think is reasonable. So it can be tested at the 829 stage, a decade after that initial, that moment when everyone was excited about this fresh thing. So we've got to be thinking about that as well, as a part of this process and business plan drafting.
Right. For the future, you want to set a bar at a place where it's going to maximize your chance to get over that bar and exceed your promise, over deliver on your promises rather than under deliver.
Yes, yes, indeed. All right, so we'll open the floor for a few Q&A, and I'll leave this screen open for a little bit before I stop share. So to contact Suzanne, do visit her website and check out her blogs. It's just I might even say, if one is starting to learn about EB-5 and EB-5 fundraising and just orienting yourself in this space, I would say start with Suzanne's blogs. So they're right here. This QR code is to set up an introductory call, which I'll be happy to do with folks here today or watching later. It's a 20-minute introductory meeting. And I will be at the IIUSA conference in Atlanta next week, May 20th through the 22nd, I believe. So, and I will be meeting with clients who are based in Atlanta as well. So if you will be there, do give a shout out and get in touch with me, and it would be nice to meet in person. Pre-RIA and post-RIA, do kind of have some overarching observations, thoughts, feelings about what you do, business plan writing before and after.
I would say that the most important difference for me is that I can now expect the business plans that I write to be read 2 or 3 years earlier than was my recent year's expectation. And that really makes a difference as far as the evidence list. Before, number one, 100% sure they would send a request for evidence because so much time had passed since the business plan was written. They would just ask for new information anyway. And then also people could count on a lot more time too. If they didn't have quite all their ducks in a row at the time they filed, by the long time in the future when it got reviewed, they would know at least we'll have it then. And it's different now when we can expect that in a year or less, this will be reviewed. And another thing that's just interesting is how much more sensitive timing is as an issue now, with, on the one hand, it's become more material for EB-5 investors with the sustainment period starting at the time of investment. And so all of a sudden, the detail about when is EB-5 money coming in and when are expenditures happening, that's a very sensitive timing detail. At the same time, timing is this thing that is generally most subject to change from what you think is going to happen. And so it is a hard balance to think about, well, I want to put in more detail because it's so material. On the other hand, I don't want to put too much detail because we don't want a lot of detail on something that is subject to material change and might have to file amendments if we get it wrong. So that's an interesting thing to think about.
It is definitely, those are such good points, such good points. It really is a dance, you know, and there's, you know, you have more of this and less of that, and you're kind of balancing and weighing. There's a lot of judgment involved in this. And a great point about the timing, and that does put, you know, more pressure on the front end. You know, one does feel you've got less time to get the other pieces that maybe are not quite so, you know, perfect, from our exhibit index list. You know, you might be counting the 84 days you have on your RFE, to be able to deliver on some of those pieces, rather than the couple of years that you might have thought you had pre-RIA. So that's a very, very good point. All right, folks, we have exceeded the half hour allotted for this topic today. Thank you so much, Suzanne.
Thank you for having me, Carolyn.
And thank you, folks, for joining, and we'll see you next time. Be well.